In this podcast, you'll learn 12 common phrasal verbs in English that were chosen by ChatGPT. And you may be familiar with at least one of the uses of each of these phrasal verbs. However, phrasal verbs can have very often more than one meaning. And in this episode, we'll help you understand and practice them. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, and if you're a new listener to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. And if you've come back to listen again, thank you very much. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take your vocabulary, your grammar, and this week your phrasal verbs up to the next level. How are you doing, mate?
I'm feeling great, thanks. I really enjoyed that coffee we had a minute ago. It's really picked me up, and I'm raring to go, ready to record another podcast. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And I enjoyed the coffee too. And that's a typical example of exactly what we spoke about last week. A nice cup of coffee, picking you up, making you feel good about yourself and ready to record another podcast.
And did you notice the words pick me up? That's what we're going to be talking about today, phrasal verbs. So the coffee picked us up. It made us feel better.
Now, if you're a long-time listener, I'm sure you'll remember that we've spoken about phrasal verbs many times in the past. But because ChatGPT has become so popular and it's being used a lot for generating ideas and content online, I thought, well, I wonder what ChatGPT thinks are the best and most common phrasal verbs for students of English to learn and know. So I put that into ChatGPT. And my prompt, or my question, was, what are the 12 most used phrasal verbs in the English language? Now, it's a very general question. Obviously, that could mean in spoken English. That could mean in written English. I didn't specify. And also, there are many lists on the internet that are focused more on academic English, on informal English, but just a general idea. And the reply I got back was this. The English language, shall I read it as a robot, Reza? The English language has numerous phrasal verbs, but here are 12 commonly used ones. Now, you've seen the list. I shared the list with you before we recorded. What do you think? Do you agree that these 12 are common enough to be in a list of common phrasal verbs?
Yes, I think so, except one or two. I can't remember which ones. I'll mention them when we get there. But there was one or two where I thought, really, would I put this in the top 12 myself? I'm not sure. But the vast majority of them, yes. What about you?
I agree. Yeah, I think generally speaking, they are common. I'll just run through the list very quickly of the 12 we're going to look at today. We have take off, turn on, look forward to, put off, get up, very common, look up, bring up, set up, give up, lots of ups, break down and look after. Those are the 12 we're going to look at. What's the first one?
Let's start with take off. Take off can mean to remove clothes. But I better say what remove means. Remove means to take something and put it in a different place. Because if you're Spanish, you're thinking, remove remover, but it isn't.
That's to stir, isn't it?
Right. So that's the first thing. To remove means to put something in a different place to where it has been. So you can remove your clothes or you can take off your clothes. For example, she took off her jacket. She removed her jacket.
Now, that's one use of the phrasal verb take off, but if you've been studying English for a while, you probably know that sometimes phrasal verbs have more than one meaning, more than one use. So I asked ChatGPT this question. What are the other meanings of the phrasal verb take off? And this is what ChatGPT replied. The phrasal verb take off has several other meanings apart from to remove clothing. Here are a few additional meanings. So it can also be used as to become successful or to become popular very quickly. For example, imagine a singer. You could say her music career really took off after her hit single was released. She won the Eurovision Song Contest and her career took off. It really became successful quickly.
Another suggested usage of take off from ChatGPT was to imitate or mimic someone or something. And the example given was the comedian can take off various celebrities with great accuracy. In other words, the comedian can copy their actions or their voice to make us think that it's the real person, but it isn't. It's the comedian making fun. So that's another use of take off.
Can you take off Liam Neeson?
I wish I could, because I'd love to be able to say that line in Taken. What is it? I will find you and I will kill you.
But what I do have are a particular set of skills. Skills I have acquired over a very long career. I will look for you, I will find you, and I will teach you English. Did that sound like, did I take him off? Not really.
Not bad, but please don't be offended if I say that. I didn't find
was
it was
terrible.
half as intimidating as Liam Neeson's. If Liam Neeson said that to me, I would do what he said. But with you, I think, yeah, I might, whatever. I'm not that frightened.
And that's why Liam Neeson earns the big bucks. That's why he earns so much money. Yeah. Notice that it's a separable phrasal verb because I said, did I take him off well? So I can separate that meaning of the phrasal verb with the pronoun him, to take someone off, to impersonate their voice. There's another meaning, I think, to deduct or subtract or to remove. There's that verb remove again. For example, they will take off the discount from the total bill. They will remove or deduct some money. Imagine you want to buy a new bed and you go to the store, the shop, and they ask you for a deposit and you give them 200 euros deposit. So they will take off that 200 euros when you pay the balance of the bill. One very common use of the same phrasal verb, take off, is in aviation, because if you are flying somewhere, to take off refers to when the aircraft or aeroplane leaves the ground and starts its flight. For example, the plane took off smoothly from the runway. Or, what time does your flight take off tomorrow? What time does it leave? Rockets take off when they fly into space as well. So as you can see, many different meanings for the same phrasal verb, take off. And ChatGPT did also add at the end of these explanations, remember that phrasal verbs can have, or the robot, remember that phrasal verbs can have multiple meanings and contexts. So it is essential to consider the specific situation in which take off is being used to understand its intended sense. Be aware of that. Try to remember that phrasal verbs often have more than one use in many cases. The next phrasal verb we're going to look at is to turn on, which I'm sure you know in the first meaning, to start a device or an appliance. For example, it's time for dinner, please turn on the oven. Or turn on the radio, turn on the TV, turn on the computer. Of course, the opposite is to turn off. I think you'll agree that that's quite common.
For me, that would definitely be the number one use, yeah, to turn something. Just so Spanish speakers know, encender. Because there's so many things that you have to turn on every day of your life. Your computer, your phone, your TV, everything. So yeah, that's definitely going to be the top. But another very common use for native speakers, but I bet non-native speakers don't use it so much, is the meaning of to excite sexually. Native speakers use it a lot. For example, you might see written or hear low lights, soft music. Having dinner with a beautiful woman really turns me on. It excites me in a sexual or a romantic way. It turns me on. I bet non-native speakers aren't as familiar with that use.
No, and the opposite is the same for not being aroused sexually. If something turns you off, then you have no desire for having sex. So this heavy rock music really turns me off. Can you change it and put some soft jazz? And turn on the radio or turn on the music system and play some soft jazz, because this really turns me off.
Speaking of jazz, what if I said to you, Craig, who turned you on to jazz?
Yeah, that's a different meaning, but again, not as common. And that is when somebody introduces you to something or helps you to learn about it or appreciate it or like it. For example, years ago, I met a friend in Argentina, from Argentina, called Gabby. And he was a huge fan of jazz. And he played the guitar. And I knew nothing about jazz. So he played music for me. He played some classic jazz musicians. So Gabby really turned me on to jazz. Though Gabby didn't turn me on, it wasn't a sexual thing, but he introduced me to that genre of music. He turned me on to it. How did you get turned on to podcasting? How did you get started?
Through a guy called Craig. Yeah, your enthusiasm convinced me. You turned me on to podcasting.
And that's quite a difficult construction. Turn someone on and then the preposition to. So I turned Reza on to podcasting. So you need the object pronoun after the verb.
Yes, please never forget the last bit. Please never say Craig turned Reza on and leave it like that.
Yeah, that
always add the next bit to podcasting, and we feel a lot more comfortable with that.
Speaking of being sexually aroused, is there anything you're looking forward to, Reza? That's our next phrasal verb, to look forward to, which means to anticipate or to be excited about something in the future. For example, can you think of something you're looking forward to?
Well, not sexually, but I am looking forward to our next holiday. I have plans to visit Ireland in the summer, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. I'm thinking about it. I'm anticipating it. So I would agree with ChatGPT that look forward to is a very commonly used phrasal verb.
It's also very useful, especially if you are studying for an exam and you have to write letters, for example. I'm really looking forward to seeing you. Make sure you use the gerund after that preposition to. I'm really looking forward to meeting you at the airport. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you. It's really nice to finish a letter with looking forward to. And speaking of your trip to Ireland, because you were supposed to go earlier in the year, but you had to put it off. That's our next phrasal verb. What does that mean, Reza? To put something off.
That's right, Craig. I did have to put off my trip. I was planning to go in April, but I had a problem and I couldn't go. So I had to postpone, or I had to delay my trip. So now I won't be going until August. So I had to put off my trip. Or I'll give you another example. They put off the meeting until next week because they're busy this week. So to put off is to postpone.
And it's another phrasal verb that you can separate with an object. They've put the meeting off, or they've put it off until next week. But there's another meaning, of course. To put off can also mean to take somebody's attention away from what they're doing or what they should be doing. For example, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to concentrate, and somebody next to me keeps talking. Why don't you be quiet? Shut up. I'm trying to concentrate and you're putting me off. You might be in a pub playing darts or pool and concentrating hard to win the game, but somebody is laughing and joking and hitting your arm, and you say, "Stop putting me off. I'm trying to throw the dart. I'm trying to concentrate here. Don't put me off."
Another meaning of put off is to make someone dislike something or someone, or to discourage someone from doing something. Here's an example. The smell of hospitals always puts me off. I don't like going to hospital because the smell puts me off. It discourages me. Or you have to work long hours, and that puts off a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to do that job because you have to work long hours. It discourages them. They dislike the idea. It puts them off. Or his attitude put me right off him. Right here means completely. Put me off him. Yeah, I thought I liked him. Then I discovered his attitude. Now I don't. That put me right off him.
Yeah, you can also be put off of people, can't you, depending on how they are. If somebody is constantly boasting, which means telling you how wonderful they are and how many things they have and how much money they've got, you think, oh, he's always speaking about himself, he's boasting, and that really puts me off him. That stops me from liking him. Now, I think you'll agree, Reza, that our next phrasal verb is also a very popular one and probably deserves a place on this list: to get up in the morning, to rise or leave your bed. For example, I've been getting up earlier recently. I used to get up about 8 o'clock. Now I'm getting up at 6:45.
Also, it can mean when something becomes stronger. For example, he's finally got up the courage to speak in English. So before he couldn't speak English, but now he's got up the courage. He has more courage. Now he can do it. Or, oh, look outside. The wind's getting up. It wasn't so windy before, but now it is. It's stronger. The wind's getting up.
Our next phrasal verb, I think, is still common, although I would argue that it's not as commonly used as it used to be. And the phrasal verb is to look up, which means to search for information. Now, before Google, we commonly would say, if you don't know the meaning of the word, look it up. Again, I've separated it. Look it up. Look the word up in the dictionary. Now I would probably say, Google it. I would use the verb to Google many times instead of looking it up, although to look up is still used, isn't it? What do you think?
Yeah. And sometimes people kind of combine the idea. Some people say, look it up on internet, which is basically a way of saying Google it.
Google it.
Look it up on internet.
People don't say Bing it, though, do they, if they're using the Bing search? Why don't you Bing it?
They don't, yeah. Sorry about that, Bing, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, although now ChatGPT has been incorporated into Bing, maybe things will change. We'll have to wait and see.
Oh, I didn't know that. And has it not been incorporated into Google?
Google have their own AI. It's called Bard, and it had a very bad start, but I think they've improved it recently. So it's developing really, really quickly. And I think we're going to see an AI war between Microsoft, who bought ChatGPT and put it into their search engine, and Google's. We'll see who wins.
Oh, that's a big boost for Microsoft then, to have ChatGPT.
A very big boost. And look up has another meaning, which is to improve or get better. For example, things in this country haven't been very good recently. I really hope that things will start to look up in the new year. So if things are looking up, they're getting better. They're improving. Our financial situation hasn't been good up to now, but now things are finally looking up. It's getting better.
Our next phrasal verb on our list of 12 is bring up. A very common use of bring up is to raise a topic or to mention something in a conversation. For example, he brought up an interesting point during the discussion. So he brought it up. He raised it in the conversation. Here's another example. During the meeting, Sarah brought up the issue of low employee morale. She brought up the issue. She introduced it into the conversation. But of course, Craig, there are other meanings of the phrasal verb, right?
Yes, I'm pleased you brought that up, Reza. There are indeed. It means to raise a child, for example. I was born in London and I was also raised and brought up in London. So that's a nice expression to use if you're doing a speaking exam in English. Someone says to you, where are you from? Well, I was born in Madrid, but I was brought up in Barcelona, for example. So to bring someone up is to raise them.
We have one more meaning for bring up, which is to vomit or perhaps regurgitate food. For example, the spoiled food, bad food, made him bring up his dinner. In other words, he vomited. He brought up his dinner.
And the opposite is to keep down, so to keep the food down. And I really hope that Reza doesn't bring up his lunch after this podcast. I hope he manages to keep the food down. Our next phrasal verb is set up. Set, of course, a very common verb, and set up can mean to arrange or establish something, particularly a business or an online website, for example. You can say they set up a new business and they have set up a shop in our area.
Another meaning of set up is to assemble or install something. For example, he set up the new computer system in the office. So it's not exactly the same as set up a business, that's to establish. This is more to do with the installation of a system, like some software or possibly even hardware. So he set up the new computer system in the office. He installed it.
I have a feeling now that the weather's getting warmer that many people will be setting up their barbecues outside to eat outside. A completely different meaning of set up is to trick or to frame someone. You might know the word frame when you speak about a picture frame, or your glasses, a glasses frame. But if you frame someone, then you blame them for something that they didn't do. Let me give you an example. The detective was set up by his own partner and ended up going to prison. So he didn't commit the crime, he did nothing wrong, he was set up. You can also use it as a phrasal noun. It was a setup. I didn't do it.
Our next phrasal verb also has the preposition up. So as you can see, we have quite a lot of phrasal verbs with up in our top 12 list. And it's to give up, which means to quit or stop doing something. For example, in the past I smoked, not now. I gave up smoking. I stopped smoking. I quit smoking. I gave it up.
Can you think of something you've given up recently? I've given up trying to lose weight. I'm going to eat what I want. I've given up. It's impossible.
You should never give up, Craig.
Don't give up. Never give up. Our next phrasal verb has a different preposition, down, to break down. And it is a common phrasal verb in the meaning of to stop working or stop functioning. For example, last week my car broke down. Or, oh, the washing machine has broken down, it's not working anymore.
Another common use of breakdown is the meaning of to analyze or divide into smaller parts for better understanding. So imagine we've got a problem. I could say to you, let's break down the problem and identify its root causes. So I'm dividing in all the different causes. Yeah, I'm analyzing, I'm going into detail, I'm breaking down the problem.
And breakdown has another meaning, a different meaning. It can mean to lose control. If you lose control of your emotions, you lose control emotionally, you can say that you have broken down. or have a breakdown. There's the phrasal noun, to have a breakdown. And an example with the verb is she couldn't handle the stress. She couldn't deal with the stress and she broke down in tears. She lost control emotionally.
Craig, I was a bit worried a minute ago when you said that you'd given up trying to go on a diet. I don't want you to break down as a result.
No, I break down when I have to do too much exercise. I fall down. I break down emotionally when I have to do too much exercise.
Although, Craig, one thing I would say is you're not keen on diets, but you do have to look after yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I need to take care of myself. Look after is our next phrasal verb, which means to be responsible for someone or for something. And to look after is very similar to take care of. Just notice that take care of has 3 words and look after has only 2. Can you think of an example?
Well, you can look after yourself or you can look after other people. For example, she looks after her younger sister because she's 18, but her sister's only 4. So she looks after her younger sister. She cares for her. Or I could ask you, could you please look after my plants, Craig, while I'm on a vacation?
Vacation? You're American all of a sudden?
I'm on a vacation.
You're on a vacation. Well, I'll be a son of a gun.
Yeah. Or as Craig and I would probably say, holiday.
Yeah, so that's ChatGPT, that example, drawing on the database of American English and giving us vacation instead of holiday.
Does it? Is ChatGPT based only on American English? Do you happen to know?
No, it's based on the internet up until 2021. So it's looking at any data from 2 years ago and before. And you can also ask your neighbor to look after your dog, look after your cat. If you're at the airport, you ask someone to look after your bag, for example. Our final phrasal verb this episode is to carry on. To carry on, which ChatGPT gives the main common use to continue or to proceed with an activity. For example, they carried on with their work. They continued with their work. And I could say to Reza, don't wait for me, carry on. Don't pay attention to me, just carry on with your work.
Another meaning of carry on is to behave in a particular way. For example, he carried on as if nothing had happened despite the criticism. So imagine the situation. He's been criticized a lot, but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't respond to the criticism. He just carried on as if nothing had happened. So he behaved in a particular way.
A slightly different meaning, similar but not exactly the same, is to continue talking or to continue arguing. In this context, you could say, our neighbours carried on arguing late into the night. Or you could say to your partner, stop carrying on about painting the bloody flat. That's a real example. Stop carrying on about it. Give it a rest. Why do you keep carrying on?
There's another use of carry on, which is kind of related to both of what we've said already, but slightly different. I'm going to add it myself. To carry on without any object, you don't add anything after it, just say to carry on is to be annoying. Yeah, could be in any kind of context. Stop carrying on. I don't say what you're doing exactly. If I just say, don't carry on, stop carrying on, I mean, you're annoying me. And stop doing whatever it is you're doing. So that would be carry on without an object.
So that brings us to the end of our list of 12. To remind you, we had to take off, turn on, look forward to, put off, get up, look up, bring up, set up, give up, break down, look after, and carry on. And when ChatGPT finished with that list, it also said, remember that phrasal verbs can have different meanings in different contexts. So it's helpful to understand their nuances and usage patterns, which I think is good advice. Remember to look at different meanings of phrasal verbs that you're learning, and also pay attention to if you can separate the particle from the verb. And I've put this list in the show notes together with a link to Chat OpenAI, which is where you can sign up to ChatGPT for free. If you're interested in trying it, it will give you lists of pretty much everything. And the show notes can be found at inglespodcast.com/470.
Okay, so now it's your turn to practice your English. Why not use a few phrasal verbs? Do you have a system for learning phrasal verbs that could help other listeners? Maybe you know of an app, a revision system, a book. Let us know if you do. Also, let us know if you've used ChatGPT. What have you used it for? Was it for phrasal verbs? Was it for another type of vocabulary? For grammar? Did you try to get it to write your essay that you had to do for homework? What did you use it for? Please get in touch and let us know. Craig, how can listeners get in touch?
Well, there are two main ways, and we prefer the first one, and that's to send us a voice message, because if you do that, you're practicing your speaking. Go to SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/Inglespodcast, and why not record your voice message 6 or 7 or more times and just keep practicing and improving your fluency and then send it to us. However, if you prefer to write, send us an email. You can reach me, Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com. And to write to Reza, send your email to Belfast, like the city, Belfast, Reza, Reza, at gmail.com.
We'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that this podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. Why not visit the Mansion online store? Have a look at the link in the show notes to store.mansioningles.net.
And before we go out the door today, we want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. And you too can join our Patreon program for a minimum of $1.50 per month. And apart from our undying love and commitment forever, you'll also get instant access to recent transcriptions of this podcast. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Inglespodcast. Reza, who are the new people who have joined us recently?
A big thank you to our most recent sponsors, who are Marga Brand, and I'd like to stress that Natalia Incapied, I'd like to stress that she has donated more than the minimum. Thanks very much, Natalia Incapied.
You're stressing that, aren't you?
I'm stressing that. Natalia Incapied.
We'd also like to stress that we have absolutely no idea what we're going to be speaking about on next week's podcast, but we do promise we'll be back for another episode next week. So until then, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Until next time, it's goodbye from Reza.
And it's goodbye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.